Welcome everyone. We are on location at Emerald Faarufushi in the Maldives. This is essentially a 7-star resort. This is something that is unlike anything you'd ever find in the Americas. So while I'm here, I'm filming for my TV travel show, Great Escapes. And we're also photographing and filming some mind-blowing content that we're going to be utilizing for the resort for their marketing and advertising content. Now, what I wanted to go in depth with today during this live webinar is I want to talk to you guys about the process and essentially how I shoot this incredible aerial drone cinematography and photography, as well as how I incorporate underwater content, shooting with a camera body that is an underwater camera body so that you can actually have the giant dome in front and you can kind of see both above and beneath the water, which looks absolutely incredible. And then the only way to achieve that is actually with an underwater camera body. I personally like the Ike Light one because the dome of it is ginormous, and the larger the dome, the better it looks to really get that really cool above and below effect. We're also going to be showcasing some of the content that we're shooting as far as creating content for the villas themselves, whether it's the overwater villas. Also, we shot the presidential suite, which was totally over the top. It's like a $7,000 a night room, as well as shooting content of the restaurants. Now, resorts are usually really heavy on the food and beverage aspect of it, so they really want to feature each and every restaurant as well as all the beverages and the bars and all that stuff. So we're featuring a lot of that content as well and creating some really dynamic shots where it incorporates food photography, lifestyle photography, and essentially just kind of shooting the architectural interiors of the restaurants as well. So we're going to go in depth about each and every process of this. Now, it's not just in the Maldives that you do this. All hotels around the United States do it the same, but the Maldives is something a little bit special because it's a little bit more than just the resort and the hotel itself. It's also all the experiences that you can have. So on top of all of this, we're also shooting stuff with water sports, as well as the jet blade or flyboard, which attaches to the jet ski and you fly above the water, almost like a jetpack, as well as the sea bob going under the water, and it's almost like a James Bond kind of vibe. And it's kind of a really cool way to do a mechanized snorkel. On top of that, they offer parasailing, wakeboarding, jet skiing, and they also have a padel court as well as tennis court and a lot of like sports activities. So the resorts like to showcase that, hey, if I'm going to go to this amazing 5-star or 7-star resort out in the Maldives, and I'm going to be, here for weeks on end, that you don't run out of things to do. Because I think that's a lot of the concern that guests have, is that not only is it really far away, it takes about 42 hours to get here from Los Angeles, but it's also, what do you do when you're here? A lot of people, they get concerned about that, especially from an American perspective. If they don't want to just relax and sit on a beach, what kind of activities do you have and how many dining outlets as far as how many restaurants do you have in the island? So that's something that these resorts really love to feature. And that's something that I'm going to showcase throughout this session. So first and foremost, when you're shooting aerial drone photography and cinematography, one of the things that I really like to do is I love to showcase content in the middle of the day. Now, this is where a lot of cinematographers and photographers get it wrong when they're shooting drone. They like to shoot stuff at sunset or sunrise, just like you would for normal photography, because, you want that golden hour light. That is the opposite way to do it. I have done a ton of drone stuff in the evening at golden hour, and I can tell you that probably 8 times out of 10, it's not going to be as strong as shooting in the middle of the day straight down. You got to just think about that. When you're creating content and you're photographing or you're filming from the side on the ground, essentially, and shooting somebody from the side, and you're on the same level as them, then of course you want to shoot with the best light. Is going to be, coming from approximately the same angle that you are, and maybe slightly above. So we're going to be, generally shooting with lighting, and whether we're using strobes or whether we're using bounces or scrims, we're going to try to adjust it so it's just kind of slightly above your head and looking downward. But when you're shooting with drone photography and filming, you're going with the sun, right? And the sun is lighting it. So the further up you are, the more middle of the day kind of light you want to shoot with. So when we're doing aerial drone stuff like this, we're going to be creating stuff between approximately 11 a.m. and about 2 p.m. direct throughout the day. So that way we're in the height of the direct sunlight. And of course, many photographers never want to shoot during this time because it's usually the worst light on our faces with the most shadow and everything. But when we're shooting drone photography and filming, it's by far the best light. So we're hoping that, we can have amazing clear skies, bright blue, making sure that everything is direct sunlight, not even cloud cover. Like right now, a little bit of cloud cover, it's going to be a little bit harder to film and photograph with an aerial drone because it's not going to give the water the same teal blue effect as when it's middle of the day and the light is just beating down into the water and everything just glistens. So we're going to try to time it just right. And also we have to monitor the wind. Now, right here in the Maldives, we are having enormous winds. Right now, I'm on the leeward side of the islands. So, the wind is actually pretty relaxed and soft. But just earlier, we're just about to film with this amazing Mediterranean restaurant. But the wind is just whipping. It's going like 40 miles per hour just on the other side of the restaurant. So when we go to shoot, the wind has a lot to do with it. And if the wind is too intense, then we're not going to get the right content because the hair is going to be crazy, the waves are going to look intense, and even the drone itself, it's really hard to operate the drone in that kind of wind conditions. It's absolutely brutal. So obviously you want calm wind, so you don't want your drone to get, ripped from the sky. We also want to make sure that if we were shooting people, that we're going to be also creating content with calmer conditions. Now, I've been in the Maldives now for weeks, and overall, this is generally more of the rainy season. So a lot of times during this time of year, there's a ton of rain, there's a ton of clouds and stuff. So it is a lot more challenging to shoot. And that's why when I'm shooting it at a resort, I'm going to ask for as long as possible to be there. That way that I have as many opportunities to film and photograph great content. So I made the mistake early on when shooting my TV travel show, Great Escapes, that when I would go to resorts, I might spend like 3 or 4 days filming, and you run out of time really, really fast, especially if the weather's terrible. So, oftentimes I'm trying to get like 8 to 10 days at each resort so that way I have a tremendous amount of filming opportunities and photographic opportunities so the light is just right. Now, even though aerial drone photography and filming of the overwater villas and creating all this amazing content in the middle of the day, even if it's a little bit of cloud cover right now, I probably don't want to do that of the feature shots of the resort. However, the light right now is beautiful on a person. When you're shooting somebody's face, it's actually really beautiful right now to shoot this kind of light because it's a little bit more diffused. I mean, the light right now on me isn't too bad. It's not too terrible. And what we can do is we can modify it using a scrim. I usually like to use a 1 1/4 stop scrim, or if it's a heavy cloud cover, I might go a 3/4 stop scrim. So when we're doing aerial drone photography and filming of people, it's actually not so bad to do it at this time of day. So we're actually about to shoot something here in the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to be creating some content with what they call an overwater breakfast, as well as a floating beverage situation with essentially champagne that's floating in our pool, which is gonna be really cool. So we're gonna shoot some really dynamic stories of that. I'm excited. It's gonna be amazing content. We're gonna shoot it mostly with the gimbal. So I'm gonna be operating the Ronin with my Canon R5 and R5C. I'm gonna be operating that on the Ronin, and it's an 8K camera. We're gonna be filming at 4K at 120 frames a second to make sure that we capture it in super slow-mo, and that's what the resort's like. If you look at almost all high-end resort photography and filming, pretty much all of them like to have content shot with super slow-mo. It generally is the best way to do it. So we're going to be shooting with that, and then we're going to be busting out the aerial drone, or we're going to be doing some pretty up-close aerial drone shots. But the cool thing is that with the drone, we can fly it over the swimming pool out over the ocean, whereas obviously a camera operator can't go. So, you can get different angles that you normally wouldn't be able to. And it's supposed to get even sunnier as the day progresses. So we're planning it really, really carefully because it's dynamic stories. It's not just shots of the resort itself. It's shots with people in the content. So it's going to be a really, really awesome situation. And we're creating so many dynamic stories from featuring multiple restaurants, featuring the villa, the overwater villa, the presidential suite. We're shooting water sports. We're shooting different sections of this amazing and perfect beach, and we're systematically planning it with the resort and then capturing it when the right light comes about. Now, when I'm shooting aerial drone, some of the settings that I like to use, especially for doing a resort situation in the Maldives, generally I'm always going to set my drone to an ISO 100, and that way, we have essentially the sharpest and best quality content when you're shooting with an ISO 100 on a drone. And I'm shooting with a Mavic 3 Pro. I also like to incorporate having uh, shooting with a fairly fast shutter speed, only because while I'm filming, I want to also be able to capture photographs, like still photographs, while doing it. So what happens is if my shutter speed is too low, if you're down at like 125th or 200th of a second, and then I want to immediately shift to photographing, or I'm filming and I want to create just one capture of a still frame, since the drone's moving, it might be a little bit blurry if it's moving fast and you only have it set to 125th of a second. So typically my rule of thumb is I usually like to set my shutter speed when shooting with the drone. Even if I'm filming, I usually like to I like to set it a bit higher. So I might have it set to like 500th of a second or 800th of a second or 1000th of a second. And that way, while I'm filming, I can create still shots and I can still get that really sharp, crisp, split second kind of scenario. Also, of course, if it's the middle of the day, you get so much light to deal with that you are going to have to balance that out, because when you are shooting at ISO 100, you're not letting a lot of light in, right? The sensor isn't. So, but it's still so bright because it's so intense here with the light that we are going to have to stop down quite a bit on our f-stop. So oftentimes I'm shooting at like between f13 and f22, depending on the brightness of the day. And then I'm going to set my shutter speed to something of 500th of a second up to 1000th of a second. So that way I have a fast shutter speed as well with an ISO 100. And those settings tend to work really well. I tend to get razor sharp content, not only video, but also still photography. And they tend to be absolutely stunning. Now, as far as my movements are concerned, when I'm filming with a drone, my favorite ways of shooting is essentially very smooth motions. And this is something that most drone operators mess up on, is they end up doing too much tilt and pan when shooting with a drone. And what I recommend is just locking the camera at one specific angle and then just swooping through. And what I like to do is either swoop through diagonally, swoop through straight, go horizontally, or do a parallax. Those are generally the actions. Parallaxing meaning like I'm doing almost like kind of a 360-degree, I'm essentially turning and rotating at the same time. And that tends to be the strongest. So if I can operate in those different aspects, you're going to get the smoothest takes. Because what I'm going to do is I am going to take those takes and I'm going to edit them together. So if I'm going to do something with people in it, I'm usually going to do the aerial drone with 120 frames a second. I'm going to go super slow-mo. If I'm shooting it without people in it, normally I'm going to shoot it at 30 frames a second to do regular motion, because if I do slow-mo, super slow-mo, usually you need to have a lot of drama to it. And if there's not enough drama in super slow-mo, with just shooting a singular water villa, it's not going to look as good. So oftentimes I'm going to move kind of a medium speed, not too fast, not too slow, but a medium speed through the air with the drone. And I'm going to be doing those different actions from diagonal to horizontal to straight on. You can also do pull back. You can do push in, and then you can do parallaxing. And those are usually the different motions that I'm going to be operating at 30 frames a second if there's no people in it. Now, if there are people in it, then I am going to switch it to 120 frames a second. I'm going to do the same actions. A lot of times I also like to do a lot of follow sequences if I'm going to be shooting people. Now, the situation that I'm about to film with the floating breakfast and the floating champagne is I'm going to do something where I'm going to be shooting more where I'm essentially going to be following the talent. I'm going to be pushing in and following the talent. So I'm going to be behind them with the gimbal as well as with aerial drone. And then I'm going to do a pulling out to kind of essentially pull up into the sky and reveal the floating breakfast and the villa itself, which is going to look absolutely amazing. Now, I do this a lot too along the beach. So if you're shooting, for instance, like, somebody in a like a model in a swimsuit, or, you're shooting somebody at a resort and you want to create amazing beach content, walking along the sand or running through the sand or ocean, it's also amazing to do with a drone because it's so much smoother and faster than when you're doing it with a gimbal. So here I'm doing a lot of mix. I'm doing, gimbal with shooting with the stuff, the main camera with the R5 and R5C. I'm shooting aerial drone with the Mavic, and I'm also shooting stuff with the underwater situation where I've got the R5 and R5C underwater in the underwater housing. So, incorporate all of that. If I'm doing some like super high speed stuff, meaning like I'm out on like a jet ski and diving in, and the big camera body is just too unwieldy, then sometimes we also use the GoPro as well as another trick is when you are shooting anything underwater, whether you're using the underwater housing or even a GoPro. My strong recommendation, one of the most important things you guys need to think of, is definitely when you're shooting underwater, especially a person, let's say they're swimming with sharks or something, or swimming with a sea turtle or a manta ray, you've got to have a diver. It is absolutely non-negotiable. When I come to a resort and I'm filming, I always request that I'm going to have a diver shooting it, because if I have a diver, that means that they can equalize with the actual ocean current and flow by equalizing and going underneath the water and having the tank. This makes all the difference, because I've done it many times before. And in fact, some of my earliest episodes of Great Escapes, I was doing at the Four Seasons in Maui and St. Regis, Kauai. We shot with a free diver, so somebody who was essentially free diving down and then capturing it with essentially they're just wearing flippers, they're free diving down, and then they're capturing it. That kind of stuff, it can work, but the problem is that no matter how smooth you are, no matter how good you are at free diving, there's always going to be movement and shake. And I'm sorry, but it's just not going to look great. I can't use that for television. I can't use that for a commercial campaign. It's just not usable. So we always 100% of the time never want to hand hold, meaning just a person out there holding the camera in the ocean or even in a pool. It's never going to be stable enough. You always have to have a free diver, or a diver with a tank on, not a free diver. So when we're shooting content here, I have a diver with a tank on, going underwater, and they don't really even need to know much about photography or filming. You just get the camera set up, get it all ready to go. You put it into the housing, and then essentially you hand that housing. You even click a cord and then hand that housing to the diver and have them submerge underwater, and you just kind of guide them along. So when I'm filming for my show or for the a resort itself, I'm literally like maybe waiting in the water next to them, and essentially I'm moving the diver. I'm kind of like moving him while he's holding the tank, or he's got a tank and he's holding the actual underwater housing. That seems to work really well, and that way they can equalize with the water, and they can make sure everything is like perfectly smooth, and they can kind of move in, move out. They can be steady. They can go left to right, right to left, and all the actions we normally would do on a gimbal when we're above the water, but we can do it underwater with a dive tank. That's going to be one of my best secret strategies for you guys today. Is always, always, always ask for an actual professional diver to be with you if you can. Especially at a resort, they always accommodate, because they have the dive staff at these places already, and they're eager to send them on to help you with whatever you need. So that it works out really, really well. One of the advantages when you are filming at a resort like this at Emerald Faarufushi is that they have incredible staff. So, the resort, it's like a 7-star resort. Everything is over the top, Michelin star dining, mind-blowing food, incredible service. Honestly, some of the best service I've ever had in the world. But also support. So when I'm filming, they have so many workers here. It's a 3 employees to every guest. So 3-to-1 ratio of employees to guests. So there is so much staff that I always request to have some helpers come and help me out. So have them, holding scrims, holding bounces, holding equipment, moving things in place, getting everything arranged. It's so much easier than when we're doing this on our own sets, where we have to have our whole production team on set. Where typically, if I'm shooting in the United States, I'll have a 30-person production team, and I have a lot of people for that. But when we're in the resort, we don't have that luxury. We're just out here with a very thin crew. So the best part about that, though, is that we can travel light and we can have the resort come in and help us. So that is something to always request from a resort ahead of time. Another thing too is that oftentimes resorts are very they love schedules. They love to have everything super scheduled and rigid, and they like to kind of like dictate the schedule of what they want you to shoot. I always like it to be free flowing, because if it's all structured and rigid and then you run into bad weather, you run into rain or you run into major wind and stuff like that, you're going to have so many issues with that schedule. So what I like to do is I like to just be ready to go, ready to film, ready to shoot, and prepped for when the weather is best. And we want to hunt with the best weather, because these resorts always want to be shown in the best light, obviously. So we want to, create a very free flowing situation. So I always like to request that ahead of time. Now, also, when I'm coming to a resort like this in the Maldives, one thing to think about is it is a 42-hour journey to get here between the flights and the waiting for the flights. But also, once you actually arrive in the Male, which is the capital city here, you then take a seaplane to your luxury resort. So we then took a seaplane from Male all the way to the island. And in this case, we had a major rainstorm, so it delayed it by several hours. So our actual journey took a lot longer than normal. And if you were traveling from the Los Angeles, it's a long, long, long time. This time I was actually traveling from my 49-room palace in France. So it was probably half the time, half the journey to get here, but it was still a journey. Once you take the seaplane, which is incredible, you only have about 10 people on the seaplane, and you get to see these amazing atolls from above, which is also an amazing thing to photograph and film. But also, one of the things you got to think about logistically is your equipment, because seaplanes, they have very stringent rules on how much luggage, how much weight that you can take, and it's a lot less than what you can take on a commercial airline. So you have to be mindful of that. So essentially, the rules here are significantly less. It's only 20 kilos as opposed to 23 kilos for a traditional check bag, as well as your carry-on can only be 5 kilos, which is nothing. And when I'm traveling, I'm often traveling with like 2 to 3 times that, because of all my filming and photography equipment. So a request I always highly recommend you guys make is you tell and negotiate with the resort ahead of time that you have to include the seaplane transfer as well as all the luggage costs. Make sure that that is in there, because otherwise you're going to have a difficult surprise when you arrive and the seaplane's not willing to load up all of your gear. It's very important. Now, when you're shooting and you're out here and you're creating content, I also want you to think about creating it with the right people. Now, resorts, of course, oftentimes they're not going to cast models for their scenes, because obviously the logistics and the cost of that is pretty substantial. So I do recommend you bring your own talent with you, and you negotiate that ahead of time. So I did. So, you bring in talent, and then you capture incredibly strong content with professional talent as opposed to who they have at the hotel. And a lot of times at the resorts, they want you to shoot their employees, or sometimes maybe just guests or whatever. Definitely avoid doing that. You want to make sure that you're shooting a professional talent so that the content looks as good as possible. And also they're a lot easier to work with. So I definitely recommend that. For this one, it's even more unique, because since I'm in the travel show, I'm the host and director, producer, and also cinematographer. I'm kind of doing all of it. So I'm kind of directing the lighting, I'm directing the sequences, I'm producing it, I'm coordinating with the resorts, I'm arranging everything, and I'm not only filming content and operating drone, but I'm also in the content too, which makes it that much more challenging. So I'm kind of wearing a lot of hats. But that's just kind of the way it is for a travel show. We have a light crew, and I have to do a lot of stuff. But I've been doing this a long time, so I've been, shooting travel shows for the last decade. So I'm pretty accustomed to it at this point. But when you appear both in the content and from behind the camera, it also leads to a lot more challenges, because you can't just be behind the camera, like gauging where you want it to be. You also have to think about yourself and like how you're going to be appearing on camera as well. So all really important things to think about. Now, when you're shooting with the gimbal, that's the next thing that I did want to discuss in detail. I know many of you guys have come to my elite workshops. You guys have operated gimbals, and you remember probably how challenging that is, just because these things are really heavy. They can be a bit arduous to set up, and then also it's really easy for it to be knocked, or the content to shake. And we don't want that. We want it to be smooth and seamless, and we want to make sure that as we're filming, everything is just butter, just completely smooth, just like it would be on a dolly or on a crane, which is what we do it on major motion picture sets and TV sets, and doing it the same way. So essentially, if we can operate it as smooth as possible, that's one of the things I strongly recommend. And if you have a hard time with that, like for instance, if you're here in the Maldives, at a luxury resort like this, and you struggle with holding the gimbal because maybe it's heavy for you, or you have a hard time with keeping it steady, maybe your hands shake or whatever, then I always just request you ask, one of the staff to come help you. I have actually done that quite a bit where here at this resort, because since I'm in a lot of the content, I need some staff to help operate when I don't have enough crew with me. So what I'll do is I'll find like a young guy who's, usually really strong, fit, and I kind of teach him how to walk like a ninja and essentially be very, very, very smooth, because you just don't want your footsteps bouncing up and down. You want to make sure everything is like super, super, super smooth, so that as you're capturing it, you don't have any camera shake. Because once you have camera shake, honestly, the content is kind of useless. You have to have zero camera shake. Everything has to be completely flawless, perfect, and super, super smooth, because you have to match it, and everything needs to be smooth, including not only the drone stuff, but also the aerial drone as well as the underwater. And if you do see camera shake, I just cut that content completely. I don't even use it. But with operating the gimbal, it is very important to make sure that you are as smooth as possible, that you're walking like a ninja, you are also doing the right actions. Because when we're framing, it's a lot different than when we're photographing. When we're photographing, oftentimes we're just thinking about capturing the model in a certain, aspect of the frame, meaning if it's going to be like a double page spread for an editorial, maybe, the face is going to be off here, right? And we have a seam down the middle, and this is negative space, and then the frame is here. Or if you're a portrait photographer, maybe you just capture the person in the middle like this. But when we're filming, we're not essentially gauging the camera around the talent. We're more so gauging we're making sure the talent is doing their thing. We're putting them in the right placement for them to actually do their action, whether they're speaking on camera or they're doing a movement. And then the cinematography, the filming, we need to do it essentially doing an action regardless of where the talent is. And I know, and it's kind of hard to explain, but essentially if I'm standing here, I'm going to have a film camera moving across the frame. And as that camera is moving across the frame, it's capturing me in this very dynamic, moment. And it's also very, very smooth. And then essentially we're going to clip that together from another angle. So I'm always thinking about different angles. So oftentimes when I'm filming these, I'll film them from one angle, right? And maybe it's from the side, maybe they're walking alongside me. Then we're going to do one where maybe they're pulling back. Then another one where they're pushing in. Then we're doing another one from, like, say, a 3/4 angle. Then maybe we do another one from an aerial drone. But we're essentially going to do multiple angles, anywhere between 2 to 3 or 4 angles. And then after that, making sure that we have it the right take from the right angles, capturing the full sequence and story. And then that way, everything becomes super smooth and easy to cut together. What we don't want is we don't want to create what we call a jump cut. And a jump cut is essentially having the content where we're filming it from the same angle. Like if I'm filming this and then I cut it and then I then start filming again from the same angle, it's going to look ridiculous. It's going to be a jump cut and it's not going to look smooth and seamless. But if you shot me from this angle and then, we turned around and we shot from this angle, and then we have another one shooting from this angle, and then that way when we go to cut it, it's going to be all cut together really smoothly, and you're going to have just from one frame, one sequence to another sequence to another sequence, and it's all going to come back really, really smoothly. And that's why, when you film interviews, oftentimes it's a 2-camera setup, and that way it can go from both sides. You can, one camera A, camera B, sometimes camera C, and that way it's really easy to go back and forth in editing without a jump cut. Now, when you're photographing at one of these resorts, one of the most important things is to remember that you're shooting something that you need to make the viewer feel, the traveler feel, like it could be them. Like they could put themselves in that scene. So what a lot of resorts do, from the Ritz-Carlton to Emerald Faarufushi, to Taj Exotica, to Harrington Sarato, a lot of these luxury resorts in the Maldives, what they tend to do is they tend to have a lot of content where you're seeing people in the scenes, but it's not so specifically about the people. It's about the fact that there are people there. So when you're framing it, oftentimes the people are there, but you're shooting it from the back, from the side, and they become kind of a part of the ambiance, part of the resort. They aren't necessarily about them themselves. It's just the fact that they're there as guests. So when you're shooting lifestyle content in resorts, that's one thing to take into consideration. And it's one of the things that I love to do when I'm shooting at a place like this. So we are shooting stuff of us because for the travel show, it does need to be about us. But when I'm shooting the content, because I'm doing both content for the show as well as content for the resort. But when I'm shooting specifically for the resort, I am making sure that some of the content is a bit more nondescript. So the talent is going to be in the scene, but it's more of behind the talent. And the talent is there, we're kind of going behind them, seeing from the side, and they become more nondescript, but you can put yourself in that place. Like you can feel like you are that guest in that location. So just one thing to take into consideration. And also we want to capture all of the right angles, the angles of different sequences and from different perspectives throughout the resort, and showing it on the ground, aerial drone, from low, all these different facets. And that way you can get the best content imaginable, and the resort is going to fall in love with you. That's really, really critical and key. Also, when I'm photographing content like this, I like to shoot stuff where it's slightly a bit bright. I like to go a little bit overexposed. So oftentimes I'm exposing just maybe a half a stop or even one stop slightly brighter than normal. And that way I don't have to worry so much about having content that is going to be too dark, and it's not going to be as inviting. You want to make sure it's very, very inviting and very you want to go there. You want to experience it. You want to fall in love and go to that place and experience that resort. That makes all the difference in the world. So whether you're going to an ultra luxury resort, whether you're filming at a hotel in the United States, a lot of these rules all still apply. And we want to make sure that everything we're doing is to attract the right demographic here. Now, the cool thing about the Maldives is, it's extremely popular and growing nonstop, but a lot of Americans don't know about it yet. So I think there's actually a lot of opportunity for you as an American photographer and filmmaker to come here and actually shoot content to draw in essentially the American demographic, because generally when they are going to market to an American, for instance, they want to work with an American filmmaker and photographer because they want to make sure that your look and feel and style and taste generally is going to translate better to other Americans as opposed to somebody from a different country. Generally the Maldives is most popular with the Russian demographic and the Chinese demographic, and oftentimes the American style, look and feel might be overlooked, and a lot of the marketing hasn't really landed strong to the American market just yet. So that's your opportunity. And I think that places like this, of course, it is the greatest place in the world as far as for travel, so might as well take advantage of it. When you're shooting travel and resort content, you gotta make stuff that goes viral. You gotta make stuff that everyone wants to see, not only on social media, but also stuff that is gonna go big for a commercial, for a broadcast commercial, or for a print campaign or a major magazine editorial that gets people excited about the destination. So make sure to make the stuff over the top. Think about strategies and maybe things that maybe haven't been done before, but are really going to make a splash. I like to do stuff a little bit different than everybody else. I like to also create really dynamic stories, and I have certain angles, looks, feels, and styles that I like to create, but I also do a tremendous amount of coverage. That way I have so much content that I can just completely overcome everything with added value and going over the top, because of the content that I shoot is so high end, so over the top, so amazing, but also I have so much of it that when we dial it down and we edit it down, we have plenty of content for the client for them to use, because they're going to want a whole library of stuff to use, because that's key and critical for any major client when we're doing stuff like this. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I want to go a little bit in depth about essentially why we do this. The reason I do it is that I just love to travel. I love to be in amazing destinations. So I love photography, I like filming, I like travel, so I like to mix it all together. And I feel like I have a dream job. I feel like I have the coolest job in the world, but I created it. I designed my life this way. You guys can do the same. And this is why I encourage each and every one of you to come up with your own strategies, incorporating everything I've talked about today and making sure that you go out and create the dream life that you never thought was possible. As a photographer, as a director, if it's traveling the world, going to ultra luxury destinations like the Maldives, or traveling the world and going to the Seychelles or Madagascar, or traveling to Mauritius, or any of the amazing places in the world, or maybe even a 49-room palace in France, go out there and pursue something that you are passionate about. Because I can't tell you how many people that I run into every day that they don't do what they love. They do the job that they feel like they have to make a living, but they don't even believe it's possible to go out there and do their dream. And trust me, it is possible. I grew up with absolutely nothing. I grew up in the rural Midwest. I grew up in a village of less than 2,000 people. My parents had no money. I didn't have any connections, relationships, or network, but I was able to rise up and create an amazing life for myself because I thought outside the box, and I went out there and pursued my dream, pursued my goal in a way that I never thought was even possible. And you guys might not think that's possible either, but it is. And I was able to achieve this regardless of what anyone else said. So most importantly, I don't want you guys to listen to anyone else. Listen to the experts. Listen to the people that have actually done it. And I've been fortunate because I have done it. And I hope that you take my guidance as well as my photographic coaches and take their advice seriously, because this is from people who have actually done it. What I recommend not doing is listen to family and friends, listen to, other people's opinions that have never actually done it and never achieved the kind of goals that you've wanted to achieve. Go after the advice of the people that have done it and have done it successfully at a really high level. And you're gonna have way more opportunities, and you're gonna be able to pursue dreams and a lifestyle that you never even thought was possible. But trust me, all of this you just need to listen to the strategies, the guidance, and go out there and do it.